Welcome to Jhoira's Junkyard. I hope you're excited to start throwing around some artifacts and get a ton of goblins onto the battlefield. But before we jump into the video, this is brought to you by IntegerTraders.com. They have you covered for all of your artifact and storm spelling needs. So let's take a look at Jhoira herself. It's going to be two colorless, blue and a red. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Now, if you're new to Magic, a historic spell is an artifact, legendary, and a saga. Planeswalkers are legendary, so they will count towards as a historic spell. Base power and toughness of 3/3. Now, what are we doing with this particular deck? You may notice that whenever we cast an artifact, we're going to be able to draw a card. We are running what's called a Jhoira Egg Storm. If you've never heard of Egg in Magic, Egg refers to a artifact that has 0 converted mana cost. Storm is referring to a subset of Magic cards that have the Storm ability. So let's say that we've cast 10 spells for the turn. We go to cast a storm spell. That particular spell is going to copy itself for however many spells that we've cast that turn. So I'll actually cover some of these storm spells here in a second, but long story short, that's what we're doing with Jhoira. We're looking to get her down, start casting a lot of cheap artifacts to make sure we can start churning through our deck to find some of those good storm win conditions. Now let's take a look at a few of the artifacts that we're running in here. We are running 15 egg spells in here, 0 converted mana cost. I'm only going to highlight about 5 of them, just to kind of give you a little sampling of what we're working with, because some of these just don't really have an impact on the deck other than we're just trying to draw some cards. But stuff like Welding Jar, we can use it to regenerate another target artifact. Herbal Poultice, we can use that to regenerate Jhoira. And then Spellbook's going to allow us to give us no max hand size, which kind of makes, let's say that we can't storm off in one turn, at least allowing us to kind of keep a lot of cards in our hand is not going to make us have to discard a bunch of cards into the graveyard. We're also running some good mana producings at 0 cost. We have stuff like Mox Amber and Lotus Petal. Let's say that we're cycling through our deck. Once we run into one of these cards, it's going to allow us to basically kind of keep building our storm count and at the same time building up our mana. We are running about 10 other 0 converted mana cost, 15 in total, and as far as the actual total number of artifacts in the deck, it's in the neighborhood of about 40 artifacts. I'm not going to cover every single one of them. If you want to check out the full artifact spread, I do have a link down to the deck list below. But let's go and take a look at some of the creatures that really help us start churning through our deck. Once we get down Jhoira, it's going to work really well that once we start casting some artifacts, we're going to be able to draw a card. But once you get one of these creatures onto the battlefield, it really helps us filter our card draws to where we can basically just kind of almost draw out our entire deck. Stuff like Artificer's Assistant, whenever we cast a historic spell, we're going to get to scry 1 before we draw with Jhoira's ability. Quicksmith Genius, once that artifact enters the battlefield, we can discard a card and draw a card. And then with Riddlesmith, whenever we cast an artifact spell, we get to draw a card and discard a card. So just for example, let's say we have Jhoira on the battlefield and Riddlesmith on the battlefield. We go to cast an artifact, you're going to get a Jhoira trigger and a Riddlesmith trigger. You put Riddlesmith's trigger on the stack first, then you put Jhoira's. So you're going to be able to draw off Jhoira, and then Riddlesmith says, hey, draw a card, then discard a card. That way you're going to be able to look at 2 cards before you have to discard. But that's how that would sequence out if you have Jhoira on the battlefield or one of these or any combination of these. If you actually have all 3, you're going to be Quicksmith Genius in the middle as you start churning through your deck, and your opponent's going to be looking at you like, oh my gosh, when are you going to stop? Outside of these 3 creatures, we do have Delicate Archmage, which is basically just cast an artifact spell, draw a card, and then Ethereum Sculptor, which is going to give our artifacts a reduced cost. It kind of helps you, let's say that you don't have a lot of those 0 converted mana cost artifacts. Getting down something like Ethereum Sculptor is going to allow you to help you get those artifacts out at a reduced cost. Now, outside of these artifact creatures, we are running these storm cards in here, the things that allow us to win. There are a bunch of different storm spells out here. This is the particular spread that I decided to go for with my deck. So if you definitely want to add a few more storm spells in there, go for it. Our main win conditions right now are Grape Shot, Empty the Warrens, and Ignite Memories. So let's say that we've cast a bunch of spells for 10. We're going to get a Grape Shot for 10. Empty the Warrens, we're going to end up with a bunch of goblins on the battlefield. And then my personal favorite is Ignite Memories. Oh, so much fun. 5 converted mana cost. Target player reveals a card at random from their hand, and then Ignite Memories deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost. So let's say you storm up to about 15 or 20. There's going to be some times where they have some lands in the card, so they're going to reveal a land card and not going to have that damage dealt to them. But it's a really fun way to close out a game of Magic. There's a few other storm spells that'll bounce stuff back to their hands, but going for an Ignite Memories Stormwind is definitely feels like it captures the flavor of Commander to an extent. Especially considering what you're doing is drawing through your deck. But yes, outside of these particular storm spells, we are running a few more different win conditions. We have Aether Flux Reservoir, so we can pay that 50 life and deal 50 damage to target creature or player. And then Diligent Excavator, whenever we cast a historic spell, a target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Now, you might be able to get a mill win with the Excavator, just kind of depends, if your opponent's running any sort of Eldrazi or something like that. But yeah, it's really not out of the ordinary that you might be able to mill your opponent out in one turn by drawing through your deck. Now that we've covered the different ways to actually win once we start casting all these artifacts, let's talk about some of the spells that allow us to keep our turn going for as long as possible. These 3 spells right here are just as important as Jhoira. Retract, Paradoxical Outcome, and Hurkyl's Recall. They're all going to allow us to bounce our artifacts back to our hand and start recasting them. Let's say that we cast a bunch of artifacts, we don't run into one of our storm spells, but we did run into a Retract. So if we can cast Retract for 1 blue mana, bounce everything back to our hand, and then just kind of rinse and repeat. Once again, if we run into Paradoxical Outcome, it's going to give it a little bit additional bonus off Paradoxical Outcome, simply because once we choose those target number of non-land permanents back to the hand, we're going to be able to draw a card for each one of those. And when you're doing 0 converted mana cost, it feels really good once you start drawing a bunch of cards. And the same thing with Hurkyl's Recall. Return all artifacts target player owns to his or her hand, so you can use it to kind of mess up your opponent, or most of the time, we're going to be using it to send all the artifacts back to our hand. Outside of that, that's pretty much what the deck is designed to do. We do have a few utility cards I want to cover, but that's really the core of the deck, is a bunch of artifacts, some storm cards, some sort of creature that filters through your deck, and then a storm win condition. But let's go and take a look at a few of the utility cards in here. We have Tezzeret the Seeker. Let's say that we just can't get storm going for some reason. We have a bunch of artifacts on the battlefield that are just doing nothing for us. We get down Tezzeret for 5 mana, plus up, get it to that 5, and then the next turn go for that -5, where all of our artifact creatures get power and toughness of 5/5. Merchant Scroll, absolutely auto include in this deck. Search your library for a blue instant card, reveal it, put it in your hand. Basically, there's going to be some turns to where you rip into the Merchant Scroll, then for 3 mana, you're going to be able to redo everything that you just did between Merchant Scroll and Retract. And then we're also running Storm the Vault. Most of the time, we're not going to be dealing damage to our opponent, but at the beginning of your instep, if you control 5 or more artifacts, transform Storm the Vault, which is more than likely going to be able to happen with this particular deck, and it's going to turn it in Vault of the Cataclysm. Tap, add blue mana to your mana pool for each artifact that you control. Not that you necessarily get really tight on mana, but at least having a land that can tap for every single artifact you have, it's always nice to go for something like that. But that's going to be the deck tech. That's it. I've got 3 gameplay videos up for you right now, and they've all got a bunch of fun different gameplay experiences through them. But if you enjoyed the deck tech, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.